Welcome to a very special edition of Beyond the Checkbox, where we're bringing mental wellness to leaders to bring to their organization through leadership conversations and illustrating the power it can have for organizational performance. I'm your guest host today, Jason Gottwalt, our VP of Growth here at Headversity, stepping in for Dr. Ryan Todd. And most excitingly, we're going to have a conversation today with Leigh-Ann Ing, who's the Director of Global Wellness and Benefit Strategy at Omers, Oxford. Well, I am very excited to be the first guest host of Beyond the Checkbox, and even more excited to be able to have a conversation with Leigh-Ann Ing. Leigh-Ann, hello. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing great. Good morning. For everyone listening in and watching, I'm our VP of, Jason Gottwalt, our VP of growth here at Headversity, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to work within the corporate well-being space for about the last 11 years, and in HR in general for about 13. And today we're going to be talking just about that, like we do every day, every time on here and on Beyond the Checkbox. How can we bring mental wellness to our organizations as leaders, and how can we learn about strategies through stories and frontline leaders and leaders such as yourself, Leigh-Ann, who've had a wonderful career in health promotion, in health and wellness, understanding benefit strategy, etc. For our guests, for our audience, could you, you have a wonderful career from really interestingly with the Canadian Cancer Society, quit specialist, and I want to learn more about that, and then focused in the well-being field, grew a career with top consultancies, Sun Life, Mercer, Willis Towers Watson, Mercer again, and now the global director of wellness and benefit strategies for Omers. So tell us a little bit about your journey to where you're at with Omers, and of course, a little bit about your work with Omers.
Yeah, Jason, more than happy to. So it almost sounds like we're talking at my retirement. So I just had this weird flash forward and couldn't accomplish anything really. But with that in mind, quit specialist. So I studied at the University of Western Ontario, now just Western University. And my full intent was to become a medical doctor. And I had an aha moment during one of my annual physicals. And I thought maybe, that's not the way I wanted to go. So I didn't have my mind made up one way or another in terms of what my future held after graduating. So this posting from the Canadian Cancer Society for their smokers helpline. And the quit specialist story is that, I fell in love. I guess that's where I fell in love in terms of population health promotion, and had my other aha moment in terms of, wouldn't it be great if there was something we could do for a captive audience, as opposed to forcing message or trying to get that message across to a larger population? What about if it's just a group of key workers? So that's where I started my journey into focusing on, organizational wellness, organizational health, and here we are. So it's been a journey, like any journey, bumps along the way, but I'm very excited to be here with you today, but excited to be here at Omers Oxford as their Director of Global Benefits and Wellness.
Wonderful. When I was looking even further back into your career, I know we've had a number of conversations to date. Saw quit specialist, and I'm thinking, okay, quitting smoking. We're talking about changing behaviors and changing behaviors at scale. Like you said, population health, into wellness, into corporate well-being, concentrated populations, if you will. What were, maybe if you can describe for everyone, were there some key moments along your career with different employers or in different roles? Because you were with the Ministry of Health too, with the Ontario Ministry of Health and Health Promotion and Sport. Were there key milestones or projects that you worked on that really progressed your work forward and your understanding of the needs in the workplace?
I can't really pinpoint one way or another what key moments were. I just always saw sort of the next stepping stone. And, for the listeners, I will say that, very, very fortunate, very, and recognize, that as I grew my career, because I know not everyone has the opportunity to stay within one field for a good chunk of time. But I would say, with each growth opportunity for me was always being willing to, number one, being challenged and being stepping outside of my comfort zone. Even though myself, I know us as humans, we are resistant to change so much. And this goes back to that sort of behavior in terms of seeing behavior change. I found that's when, when I went down that road to uncomfortability, it was where I found those key moments in terms of being able to have other avenues, doors, windows open to me in terms of what else could I do or go with this career. So I would say just being open and knowing that, the world is your oyster, and having that really positive mindset, no matter, what is thrown your way, just knowing that, just having that inherent trust that things will work out.
Wonderful. You mentioned a couple things there that were important for your journey. Recognizing challenges that may be called for your expertise and your interest and your curiosity, and getting outside of your comfort zone. So wonderful. That's how we grow, getting outside of our comfort zone. So I know you and I have talked quite a bit around, of course, mental health in the workplace, mental wellness, and we've talked about particularly burnout. We hear it a lot from leaders. We've seen more and more studies come out around a high percentage. I've seen a recent one in the US, 76% of employees reporting feeling burnout. And we hear the vocabulary around burnout quite a bit. The term is being used quite often. So there's an interesting dynamic there, I think, between, how far do we challenge ourselves? How far do we get outside of our comfort zone? What does that look like? What does that require as an individual contributor to an organization, or to progress our career, or progress just our learning journey in general, our personal journey? And how does that dynamic play with the very real workplace phenomenon of burnout? So I want to dig deeper into that specifically. I think there's a lot of questions around burnout at a leadership level and at an individual employee level. I know I have a lot of questions. And but what is that term when I say burnout to you, Leigh-Ann? What does that mean to you based on your career thus far? And what does that mean to Omers?
Mm-hmm. From a personal standpoint, Jason, I will fully raise my hand and say that, like very many people, I've experienced burnout at multiple stages throughout my career. I think it's normal that we talk about it and be open about it, right? Because I think when folks, and I know there's stigma still exists around mental health, mental well-being, but burnout specifically, especially in high performing cultures, I think folks are really scared to say, I'm burnt out, I need a break, I need to take a step back, I need to offload projects or what have you. I think we need to start changing that narrative and start being comfortable when folks put up their hand and say help. That, us as people leaders, us as employers need to really be aware, have that empathy, and have a concrete plan of action, whether it's from an individual standpoint or collectively from an organizational standpoint. And I will also say that it's a two-way street, right? Like anything else in life and any partnership relationship. Yes, individuals may own and have personal attributes or personality traits that, liken them to burnout more strongly than other folks. But also it's important that we look within organizations to see what we can do not only to be leaders, but to, again, have folks be comfortable, have our employees, have our colleagues step forward and raise their hand and say help. So this is part of building that psychologically safe workforce, right? That we all hear about, not only from a national standard standpoint, but looking at the work that Amy Edmondson has done, sort of setting that foundation that it's okay to fail. It's okay to have and be authentic and raise your hand and come to the table. That you may be facing, personal, professional, or otherwise. And I think when folks hear the word burnout, they feel like, oh, okay, maybe, it's just a point in time. They just need a few days rest or take a week's vacation and everything will be okay. That is not the truth, right? I think those of us who have experienced it, those of us who work with it, know that's not the case. It is, again, it needs time for folks to recover. And it's tough. It is so tough. I think, we liken it to like a virus, cold, or the flu. And then, once it's done, it's done. But you have to, as an individual, build in those behaviors to make sure that you are changing over time, own them, whatever they may be. So whether it's better work-life balance, learning to say no, or, from an organizational standpoint, yes, we have to be committed to it, because this is one of the biggest, I would say, risks that exist, especially, as we don't know what's going on with COVID and how we're going to come out of it, or if, we're ever going to come out of it, depending on what happens over the next few months.
That's interesting. Unlike a common cold, let's say, where I'm not feeling well, because I have a cough or a headache or minor fever, something such as that, where it's prescribed, take a couple days off and rest. It doesn't work the same with burnout. And I've read a bunch of articles and studies around that. You can't just sleep it off, which might be maybe thought of as the solution. Okay, I've been working long hours. I've been on this project a long time. It's been, we're trying to get it off the ground. It's been a year and a half and we're almost at the finish line and I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm feeling less engaged in this project. I just want it over with. As soon as we're done, I'll take a couple of days off and everything should be okay, back to normal. But that's not really the case. So I think, to my own experience, especially ever since we've started talking about this, you and I, have I experienced burnout? Am I experiencing it right now and not recognizing it and trying to push through it? Because there's a lot of things I want to accomplish within my career, within Headversity. There's a lot to do, and that requires a lot of work and a lot of hours. And I'm not sure. Have I? I've felt exhausted at times. I don't know if I felt distanced from my job or anything like that, but has there been points in which my efficiency or my productivity has suffered because of exhaustion, because of potentially feelings of burnout? Yeah, probably. You mentioned throughout your career you'd had experienced burnout, or identified, at least at that point, or in hindsight, that you had. Can you describe what that might feel like for someone who, like myself, who doesn't know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm more than happy to. And owning that this is my own personal experience.
Of course.
Feel different and look different depending on the individual. But for me, when you're sort of running through some of the symptoms or signs, being fatigued, not just physically, but mentally tired, like you just have nothing left in the tank, running on fumes, is the way that I feel it. And all I want to do is basically sleep. So my first experience with burnout was very early in my career. And I readily admit that, I need to own my own actions and behaviors. And it's taking me, a long time to do so. Actively in therapy to not only manage that, but also, I have general anxiety disorder with depressive episodes. That's part and parcel to it. But for me, it's sleeping. If I find myself, and this is where I know I'm going down a slippery slope, right? Jason, you talked about, am I experiencing it? I have things I need to accomplish in my job on a day-to-day basis, or, with regards to what my plan is. But for me, as a driver, as a type A individual, being ambitious, sometimes I don't know when to stop. So I typically, and I've learned this, that when I start sleeping or start basically cocooning myself in my bed, literally cocooning myself, that is a warning sign for me. And if I tend to ignore that sign, then it's a rapid decline into, just a full on spiral. So, negative thoughts around work. We all vent, it's normal, but sometimes it becomes excessive. I know I'm not a happy person. You can feel it, right? You have this sense of apathy. Very testy as well. Just not, obviously professionally, I like to think I'm professional and put that front on, but at home, I find my patience to be very, very thin when I am in that burnout range. And then, it's gone to the point where I've needed to take time off because that burnout has been so extensive, not only in terms of the feelings, but the length of time that it's led to, my anxiety creeping up and depression kicking in. So it's needing to take a step literally away from work, whether it was 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, in order to get back to a healthy state.
The key insight there for me is understanding you've been able to identify your personal warning signs, I think is the term that you used. What are the things, just as a human being, for yourself, as Leigh-Ann Ing, as a leader, what is that warning sign for you, of course, around sleep? And now, how did you get to that warning sign? Was it because you mentioned a kind of a downward spiral? And I think a lot of us can relate to that. Was it in retrospect and just being curious about that downward spiral, and then, okay, now I know it's the warning sign? Did it take? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, if I'm counting correctly, I've been, in burnout maybe 3-4 times. And
Okay.
I always feel like I'm maybe creeping close. And that's where, to your point, you have to be aware of those signs. But it is very much ensuring, and it is retrospectively, like I wish everyone had a barometer, with sort of a gauge saying warning, 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 time to take a time out. But that's not the reality. It is retrospectively. And quite honest, after 4 bouts of it, I'm still learning new things about myself. Things change and evolve over time, as do we, but it is very much, looking back. Sometimes folks need help, professional help, to look back and identify what those traits and behaviors are. And another one for me was, not taking care of myself. So not working out. I like to go to the gym, Jason. We've talked about this. Not a runner. I will only run if, my life is in danger, to be quite honest. But, and I don't adhere to regular meals. Like there'd be times I would be working until 1 o'clock in the morning, haven't had dinner. My husband would forcefully close my laptop and place a meal in front of me to eat, whatever it was. So again, we all have to sort of take inventory in terms of what our true north is, but also what those warning signs are. And it's tough. It is so tough.
Well, good on you to take that time to self-assess. That's something I need to personally practice a little bit more. I get through it. Maybe it was a rocky, very likely I need to do kind of a look back, but I was working through burnout and didn't identify it and didn't take the opportunity to identify what were maybe those warning signs, which thankfully I will do. Do we have a systemic problem? So we talk about burnout, you look at the World Health Organization, it's a workplace phenomenon. Mm-hmm. It's really, importantly, I think 2019, they reclassified or redefined it, which was important for the medical community, because it allowed us to really hone in on how that's different from a stress syndrome or a mental illness specifically. It's tied to the workplace. We're in a pandemic. We all went home and worked remotely. For anyone who's read some of the, the Forbes headlines and the studies, we're working longer hours as a result, whether it's directed to work longer hours, whether we're getting emails at random times from our bosses or colleagues, whether we feel because we're in our office 24/7 that we should be working. I've been working remotely for 7 years, and it's still a challenge for me to turn off. And then when we do log out, we're immediately there with our family. We don't have that cushion of a commute, perhaps, as much as we all will complain about long commutes, especially if you're in a big metropolitan area like Toronto or any major city. So I guess you've looked at population health, you've been in the industry, you've worked as a principal in health and productivity at Mercer, and then later as a principal of total health management clients across Canada, and I'm sure with a global scope like you have now. Do we have a systemic problem where, as much as an employer might do, there's just a cultural push toward doing more?
Yeah. Personally, I would say yes. Your question makes me think about a session I was asked to speak at for newer students or newer employees. And someone raised their hand and asked if, in my own perspective, if I didn't put in the hours, blood, sweat, and tears to my job, do they think I would have been as successful or promoted to the level I was? Now, I like to think I'm very forthright, and my answer to them was, if I didn't do that, the answer is no. So I think we live in a culture that productivity at all costs, at any cost, is rewarded. Should that change? Absolutely. I think productivity looks like different things to different people, to different organizations. But I think out of all of this, we've forgotten that, productivity is gained through human interaction, outcomes from humans producing. And if us as humans break down, like how a machine breaks down, that line goes, that machine goes offline, right? And people come in and fix it to make sure that it is producing the way it should. We don't have that built in inherently from a human perspective. We don't say, okay, Jason, it looks like you're breaking down. And, it still doesn't sit right with me that, productivity is sort of the standard for which we have to gain burnout, because burnout can experience in any facet of life, whether it's caregiving or what have you. But in the context of work, it always comes down to productivity. So with that in mind, we don't have that. We don't have keen insight into, number one, this individual is breaking down or is having burnout. Number two, we don't really have experts to come in and say, okay, Jason, we see that you're burnt out. So we're going to, provide you or give you a list of resources and experts to help fix you and take the time off that you do need. It's very much up to the individual to put up their hand and say, I need help. And for many of us, that asking of help goes unanswered for a very long time until it comes to a point where they actually need to go off on a disability. And quite honestly, that's not the right thing to do. We want to get ahead of these types of disability cases, because we all know in the industry, the longer someone's off on disability, the harder it is to get them back in. So it is a systemic issue. We do need to be mindful. We have to look at it just like how we look at other business risks. If we know that there's a key area or there's a key risk in the business that is causing fault or issue, we typically see all hands on deck to fix that issue. We don't have that same approach. Historically, maybe things will change because of what we've experienced through COVID. But that's the way I liken it. If we are going to commit resources to fix any type of business risk, why aren't those resources being dedicated to this real risk from a human level? And this is why I'm very, very fortunate, very lucky to work with Omers Oxford, because they do believe that. They have made it a priority. It is one of the pillars in terms of wellness of our people experience. So with that in mind, it does take keen leadership and brave leadership to say this is an issue and we are going to earmark resources to it.
I love that parallel or that analogy. It resonates with me. So the analogy of, if we have capital equipment that's breaking down, well, first of all, we hire a significant amount of resources and professionals to take care, to maintain preventative maintenance professionals. If you are manufacturing, you know what I'm talking about here. And we have a whole line of people, a whole department focused on preventative maintenance of capital equipment. And if you think about the capital investment we make in our people, which is by far the largest, there's not really that preventative maintenance department for our people. And to your point, we can see if a machine's not working properly, if it's obvious, it's immediate, but we can't see how someone might be thinking, feeling, or behaving, and we cannot ever really put ourselves fully into their shoes because we haven't been part of their entire experience and the way that they've experienced work, the world they've grown up, the culture that they've developed themselves in, and so forth. But it's a perfect analogy because we need to move that way, and it does take brave leadership. Have you seen a shift? So we had in 2013, you mentioned psychological safety earlier in our conversation, and of course the direct tie-in to what we're talking about today around mental wellness and burnout, and what you're doing there at Omers, Oxford. In 2013, the Mental Health Commission of Canada launched the psychological safety standard in the workplace. Just recently, I'm not sure if you're aware, but a couple months ago, I think, there's now a global ISO standard around Okay. But have we seen a shift? Have you seen in your experience, Mercer, now Omers, have you seen a shift where employers are taking the lead toward tackling the systemic side of the issue?
I think so. I think there's still work to do, right? But I like to think that, this pandemic has made all of us sit up in different ways and take notice. And for many employers, I will say that they have sat up and taken notice. So I think this was the impetus to see, number one, how far reaching and how deep this issue is. And this was just sort of that event that brought it to light. So I do think that we are going to see movement. We have heard leading organizations, brave organizations, and employers say, you know what, this is now a business issue for us, business priority for us. We are dedicating those resources. And I think, where we will start to see change is that instead of focusing on, okay, I'm going to have EAP or EFAP, I'm going to have virtual mental health counseling, or just, solution. These are all great. They're all fantastic for those folks who do need it. But, in and itself, if you're just going to offer it as a standalone, it's a Band-Aid solution, right? There needs to be that overarching strategy in terms of, okay, what is our plan now, but also in the future? What are key success measures? What are KPIs? And how do we move that dial, right? I talk to my team internally. This is a slow burn. We're talking culture here, right, Jason, as you mentioned earlier. And those of us who work in organizations and who have worked at changing culture knows that it's like big ship, small rudder. It takes time, right? So people have to be on board with that, especially leadership, because it's not a flash in the pan. It's going to be constant day-to-day, nose to grindstone to ensure that, we're making that movement. And then, in retrospect, looking 5 years later, hopefully we'll see that change. But I'm feeling confident that employers have set up, have taken notice, and will start to go down that strategic route. I think right now, yes, definitely resources are important, especially in time of need. But I'd like to see folks start moving towards, what is our game plan, as we drive towards that goalpost.
So you mentioned the term, what are our metrics, what are our KPIs around this? And I think that's a question probably on a lot of leaders' minds. How do we measure this? Where are we at? What does good look like? What does great look like? What's the standard? And I think the ROI question is starting to go away, because this is no longer a nice to have focus area. This is a must have as we continue to globalize a lot of organizations or industries, as the human capital and our creativity and our collaboration, communication skills become the most sought after skills. We need to focus, like you said, on culture. You mentioned earlier the cost of performance and advancing one's career, at least in the past and maybe still existing today, was putting in, exhaustive hours, doing great work, but putting in the hours and the time. And we need to shift what productivity looks like and performance looks like, great performance looks like for an organization. Maybe that's more long-term thinking than immediate gratification of getting something from someone. But what's the long game we're trying to play here? So what metrics are you looking at with your team, with Omers? What are those KPIs?
Yeah, great question. And I will say, depending on the industry, it will vary. I know for, heavy industry, manufacturing, obviously safety is key, right? You want to make sure that that's being minded too. But internal to Omers Oxford, we are very lucky that, we have a multitude of data points we can rely upon. So whether we're looking at our benefits utilization or disability experience, how folks are uptaking in terms of different programs, we have our employee engagement survey. So we have multiple tools that are available to us. And we're actually working internally with our data and technology team. And one of the things that excites me every single day is being innovative in this space and having folks to play in that sandbox with, which is, part of our great story here at Omers. So working with our colleagues and developing a dashboard to look and measure in real time burnout rates, I should say close to real time burnout rates, looking at how folks are multitasking or where they're, how they're spending, I don't want to say how, but where they're spending their off hours. So I know it feels a bit big brother, but at the same time, we do have confidentiality, privacy built into this. We work very closely with our privacy team to make sure that this is of our utmost concern. But, these are key indicators that will be able to demonstrate to us not only where we are at, but also where we could go. And if there's a need to pinpoint or look, at how we can pivot, or if we need to shift gears in real time, we're able to do that. And this is one thing that, I haven't been able to do even in my prior life. So being able to get my hands dirty and actually see what is going on from an organizational standpoint, it is, number one, so rewarding, but number two, so important from an information perspective.
I love that. So number one, we need to make informed decisions based on data, and probably a combination of the subjective data that we might get from managers, leaders, employees, everyone, all stakeholders, but have the data and create a culture where everyone's okay to collect that data, to continue to contribute to that data, but holding individual privacy as the utmost importance, and making those informed decisions. So just here's a question I had. I always wanted to ask you, and you kind of prompted me here, so I got to do it. What would you tell your consultant self now, right? What would you tell your consultant self to be a better consultant, or a more informed consultant, maybe would be a better way of positioning it, to your previous clients, based on now how long have you been with Omers? Almost a year. So now that you're 1 year in with Omers, director, global wellness, benefits strategy with an organization that has put a priority on supporting mental well-being of all stakeholders. What have you learned about the internal challenges to get something that off the ground, measurement, et cetera, et cetera? Mm-hmm. What do you tell your consultant self, if anything?
Yeah. That's a pretty loaded question, Jason. So do we have
And
enough time in
disclaimer
this,
for
right?
all previous clients of Leigh-Ann.
Right? No, I listen, I hold my previous colleagues from all walks of life and all my employers with the utmost regard. And same with clients. But if I were to, go back and whisper in my ear, maybe, maybe 2 years ago, a year ago, would be that it's okay not to be okay. You don't have to prove that you're a superstar every day. I heard this analogy that really resounded with me. Our garden isn't in full bloom every day, so neither should we, right? It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have an off day. It's okay to go to bed early and disconnect. You will not fault if you take care of yourself. And I think that is the biggest take home from message for me in this past year is that we all need to make ourselves a priority. If we don't invest ourselves, no one else is going to do it for us, right? So whether it is getting enough sleep, meditating, getting active, eating right, it is so important that we at least look at one or a few of those and start to actually engage and, like I said, just make it a top priority.
Well said. Well said. Leaders need to take care of ourselves, right? First and foremost. The one, the whole airplane, you put on your mask first. I heard a wonderful quote, or I quote a wonderful individual. It was maybe about a month ago where they said the leader of 5 years ago doesn't exist today. And what she was relating to is if as a manager or as a leader of people that you're not starting to implement and integrate psychological safety into your team dynamic and supporting an environment where it's okay to make a mistake, it's absolutely welcomed and encouraged that you voice your opinion and you contribute in any way that you feel your perspective would contribute to the team, and that we're non-judgmental of each other. If you're not starting to do those and more things, you don't exist anymore. So leaders, in a lot of ways, managers, I've also heard, it's becoming more around coaching as well as part of that role. So is it a challenge? Like, what do we tell leaders or managers, or what do you tell the leaders and managers there at Omers who I think, like yourself, myself, want to see people just absolutely be overly proud of the work that they do, that they're exceeding their own expectations, that they're thriving and they're producing top quality work and feeling great about it. When we're seeing signs of burnout or noticing someone struggling, or maybe the work is not as good as high quality as it used to, but we don't think that's necessarily the person. There's something else happening. Or individuals continuing to try and perform their best. As a good coach, I relate it back to sport is, the great coaches that I had were they really knew when to, maybe that's not the right term for the workplace, but when to push me a little bit beyond the way I was thinking about something and struggling, learning a new skill or refining refining my swing or improving, the way I threw the ball and et cetera. And when to kind of step back a bit. And I think it's a difficult dynamic. And as much as at an organizational leadership level, we can continue to do the things that you talked about to build and help develop a culture of care. It's really those frontline managers that I think need these kind of tools. So what kind of advice would you give any manager right now that might have someone who on their team or people on their team that they think, is this a performance issue and they're not, maybe trying as hard or putting their real work into it, or is this something else that we should address in a different way?
Yeah. Great question. Um, being a people leader myself and, amongst other colleagues here, as well at Omers Oxford, we're all in a bit of a pickle, right? We're looking after our team, their well-being, making sure our goals are being met that we had, put forward at the start of the year. While at the same time, looking after our own individual wellness, right? So what we have said to our people leaders, what we call managers here internally, is that, in order for us to recognize or understand when someone's maybe faltering, is to engage in those conversations. Don't wait until, we see those signs already popping up. But if you have regular one-to-ones, get to know that person a little bit better, right? Outside of the productivity, outside of the work issue, because you will start to understand what is going on behind the scenes. Maybe not, depending on the individual. But I think often, we're scared. People leaders are scared to ask, how are you? Really, how are you? Right? So leaning in, having those tough conversations, and we have worked with our people leaders and our awesome growth and development team to equip these managers in order to feel comfortable to start asking those questions and knowing that you may not get a response, and that's okay too, right? And that's when we start pivoting. What can I do to help support you? Right? Again, two-way street. We need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. We need to ask how folks are doing, especially, if we still find ourselves in a remote or even hybrid working model. I think it's just, again, giving space, being empathetic, being human, just, asking those questions, right? Having a valid curiosity as to what is going on with your group. And then, on the flip side, if you're feeling, out of sorts or a bit stuck, then I think that's one's cue to raise your hand and have that same conversation with, your one up. And with that in mind, often we like to think that we have to have people leaders ask, how are you? And if someone's struggling here, we like to say that you will never be judged. It will never be held against you. Step forward, ask that help. We will get you that help.
Wonderful. It's a brave question right now, right? And hopefully in 3, 4, 5 years, that's a common question that people leaders are asking their teams, or a question that maybe even better doesn't need to be asked because there's just open conversation around this.
Absolutely. And I think, Jason, that's where, vulnerability, right, is so important as a people leader. Not only owning when, you messed up or there was a mistake made on your own account. I mean, we're human again, right? We make mistakes and that's okay. But, if you're having an off day as a people leader, own it, right? If, that maybe you said something out of turn and it wasn't taken the right way or was misunderstood, own it. I think, for us, we're in a position where we can model that behavior. So why don't we? There's nothing wrong with that vulnerability. Having an off day, going back to my earlier point, even for those individuals who have mental health concerns, if they're willing and open to share, I think that's part of the battle as well, right? It's just saying this is my story, this is who I am, warts and all, and you put it on the table. And quite honestly, I've never felt to have been in a position to do that until I've arrived here at Omers Oxford, and very, very lucky, recognizing that I have been able to bring my true self and feel open and safe enough to be vulnerable, both in an individual contributor capacity, but also as a people leader.
I mean, that insight's brilliant. I think I couldn't have said it any better. Coming from, for me, the epitome of performance in so many ways. When we first met, I remember we went out, met in person. We went out for, I think, a quick coffee. One of the first things that you did say, hey, this is the way I like to work with folks, right? This is my expectation and this is what you should expect of me. And it was really about, we're going to have a great time working together and we're going to do some great work, but we have to structure, we have to hold each other accountable. We have to communicate early and often. So no surprise to me, your career growth, and isn't Omers lucky have you as their director of global wellness and benefits strategy. And for any, leader right now thinking, I just need more out of my people, whatever might be going through your minds. Leigh-Ann, you admittedly said 3 to 4 times you've experienced burnout, at least through your career, and you're a top performer. And anyone that I speak with would say the exact same thing, and contributing a ton of value to the organization. So, important conversation that we had today. I'm really grateful for your time and talking about this, being vulnerable, being very open, and of course bringing some tangible focal points for me. For the key takeaways for me is data is very important, and privacy is important, but it's really a stance that an organization has to take to say, hey, this is a principle, this is a value within an organization that we will focus on, and we'll give everyone an opportunity to contribute to, and put the programs and resources in place, but also focus on that cultural aspect of what does this look like? What does this feel like? How can we support different people at different levels in the organization? Super fantastic. One last question just on my mind is what we talked about today is a lot of prevention, right? We talked about burnout, recognizing the personal warning signs and taking time to look back, which I'm going to do as homework today. And what are those for me, or what are those for any individual? But really around prevention. And what do you do now? Like, I know you have a great record collection. Is it music? I know, of course, there's a pandemic, but I know you like to travel. What is your current routine to combat potentially burnout, but still operate and peak performance? Which, what you said, now you have the opportunity to really take your whole experience and give that to an organization like Omers that is set the foundation for you.
Yeah.
What do you do?
There's a lot that I do. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
It's like I had to prescribe myself this action plan in order to bounce back, or bounce forward. I don't like bouncing back, bounce forward from burnout. So with that in mind, I meditate. Now, I know that's not everyone's gig, to be honest. So what I typically do is a guided meditation. No more than 10 minutes after that, I can't sit still. Or if I don't have enough time in the day to do that, I find a quiet place in my house just to collect myself, not think about anything specific, not think about work, but just to collect myself before I start the day. And one of the things that I've learned to do is to check in with myself. Like if I was talking to a friend, like, what can I do to help you? So and I know it sounds a bit corny, but I do ask myself, like, what do I need right now? What help do I need? What is missing? So sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes there's, a laundry list of things that are wrong. And I'll commit to maybe touching on 1 or 2 of them. The other few items is making sure I have time built for me. So I have a structured day where I can plan for it. I will start my day at a certain time and I will close out at a certain time. Yes, my job sometimes requires me to be on, but I equally know that I need to be my best self, both at work and play. I need time away from work on a day-to-day basis, especially as we worked from home. The other item as well is sleep, eating right. And quite honestly, for me personally, is therapy. I need to have that on a consistent basis throughout this pandemic. Without that, I think I would be in not a great state. So those things collectively is what has helped me sort of bring me through all of this.
I love that. I love looking at it as a prescription for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's liberating. That's going to help face the challenges that you're going to face every day in the workplace, and build your resiliency and your hardiness and so forth. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for your time today to join us at Headversity, talk about mental well-being, provide insight and some wonderful initiatives that you're doing at Omers that I know a lot of our viewers and our listeners can take away. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Amazing. Jason, thank you so much. It's been a privilege and honor.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Have a great day. Stay safe and talk soon.
You as well. Take care.
Take care.